Never save money. My grandfather gave me this advice, and that is why I will share it with you. Look, long ago, in the fields of Texas, around the 1950s, there lived a grandfather whom everyone knew as lazy. It wasn't that he worked sometimes, it was that he never worked. He could always be found under the shade of a mesquite tree, sitting in an old chair, gazing at the horizon. He scratched his beard with his hands, and with his mouth, he never stopped talking about businesses he never started. He would say, "One day, I'm going to set up a shop, you'll see. Another day, I'll buy land, I'll have cows, I'll make money without getting tired." But that day never arrived. People no longer even scoffed. They looked at him with pity. They said, "He's a vague dreamer," and it was true. The grandmother, tired of hearing the same thing, sighed loudly so that even the wind could hear her. "Old man, life is not sustained by dreams. It's sustained by work." The grandfather raised his eyebrows, shrugged his shoulders, and always replied the same way. "We'll see, woman. Someday I'll find a way." And again, silence. Again, promises hanging in the air. The years passed, and the only thing that grew was necessity. One night, the grandson, a boy with big eyes and bare feet, asked for bread. The grandmother opened the cupboard. Nothing. It was as empty as a sucked dry bone. The grandfather looked at the floor, felt the words catch in his throat. There were no excuses. His ideas couldn't be eaten. His dreams didn't fill bellies. That night, he didn't sleep. The next morning, defeated, he went to do what he had always scorned, to work as a day laborer in the cotton fields. The change was hard, very hard. From spending hours under a tree, he went to bending under the scorching sun. From having soft hands, he had hands covered in open blisters. His back ached, his legs trembled, every muscle burned him to the bone. And in the middle of the field, with sweat stinging his eyes, he murmured, "This is worse than laziness. This is a chain." He came home at night bent over, as if he were 20 years older. The grandmother waited for him with a plate of beans and 2 tortillas, never 3. The grandson ran to the porch of the wooden house and hugged him, asking with his usual innocence, "What did they give you, Grandpa?" The old man took out the check, looked at it at length, as if searching for more letters on it, and replied tiredly, "It's little, son, but something is something." And with that, they would go to the village store. He paid off old debts, paid taxes, bought the grandmother's medicine, and then the usual, a small bag of cornmeal, beans, cheap coffee, and when possible, sugar. And on his way back, only a few loose coins remained in his pocket. The grandson would take them out, line them up on the table, count them with his fingers. And this is all that's left. The grandfather would press his lips together. This and nothing more. Thus, time passed. The check arrived. The check went away. The house continued to leak. Debt was a shadow that never moved. The grandfather felt he worked only to be able to breathe another day. One afternoon, at the store, he heard some men talking loudly, as if preaching. The secret is in saving. He who keeps always has. These words started buzzing in his head. That very night, he found a large glass jar, washed it, dried it on his pants, looked at it against the lamplight, and hid it under the bed. Every week, after buying the essentials, he would toss in a few coins or a crumpled bill. The sound of the metal falling, ting-tim, sounded like music to him. Every time he heard it, he felt that the future was being born inside there. The grandson discovered it one afternoon, lifted the bedspread, and saw the half-full jar. "What are you doing, Grandpa?" The old man smiled proudly, like a mischievous child showing off his treasure. "I'm saving our tomorrow." But that tomorrow was costly, very costly. The grandfather refused to buy new boots, even though his current ones were splitting at the toe. He walked with his toes touching the ground and said, "These will last another month." Rain came through the kitchen roof, wetting the table, filling the bucket with dirty water. He looked at the leak and said, "That roof will last another rain." On the table, there was less and less bread, less meat, almost no milk. The boy ate slowly to trick his hunger. The grandmother looked at him, looked at the grandfather, and one day she couldn't keep quiet. "Old man, what's the point of saving so much if we are starving?" He didn't look up. He continued dropping a coin into the jar. "It's for our own good. Someday you will understand." Many months passed, and then more months. The jar filled with crumpled bills and coins of all sizes. The grandfather would take it out some nights, hug it almost like a child, look at it under the dim lamplight, and smile. He felt it was a treasure chest of gold. One night, he placed it on the table. Proudly, he called the grandson. "Look, son, here is security." The boy's eyes widened. "How many bags of cornmeal can we buy with this?" The grandfather lifted his chin, sure of himself. 3, maybe 4. With this, we will never lack food." And he started to laugh. The grandson laughed too, trusting his grandfather. The grandmother, in silence, looked at him sideways, her heart aching. The next day, they went to the market. The grandfather walked slowly, but in his heart, he carried a spark of pride. He carried the jar under his arm, wrapped in an old cloth. The grandson skipped by his side, excited, asking every moment, "How many bags will we bring back, Grandpa?" 3 or 4. The grandfather smiled confidently, although his torn boots rattled with every step. "Yes, son. Today we will return with full bags. Today you will see what security is." They arrived at the merchant's stall. The grandfather carefully placed the bills and coins on the table. He spread them out proudly, like someone displaying treasure. 3 bags of cornmeal, please." The man quickly counted them, with the agile fingers of someone who sees money every day. He looked up and without a hint of emotion said, "That's not enough, old man. Prices have gone up. With this, you barely get 1.5 bags." The grandfather's eyes widened in disbelief, as if he hadn't heard correctly. "How can that be?" The merchant shrugged. "Money is worth less every day. That's just how things are." The grandson looked at his grandfather, confused, his voice trembling. Then the jar shrank. The grandfather felt a blow to his chest, as if the air had left him. The merchant, with a dry gesture, shoved a large bag and a half bag toward him. Then, without looking at him much, he put some coins and a couple of crumpled bills into the can that served as the jar and returned it. "It barely covered it, old man," he said coldly, as one who states an unimportant truth. The grandfather lowered his head, grabbed the large bag first, then the half bag, and finally clutched the can with the miserable change. The grandson looked at him in silence, his eyes full of questions. Thus, with full hands and an empty heart, they walked back home. Each step the grandfather took was heavier than the last. That night, at the kitchen table, he emptied the can. The coins and bills fell out one by one, dry as dead stones. He counted them in despair. He counted them again and again, as if they might suddenly multiply, but they were always the same. What once seemed like wealth was now just a useless pile, unable to buy even one complete bag. The grandfather slammed his fist on the table in anger. So much effort, so much sacrifice, just for it all to turn to dust. The grandmother, with a weary face, looked at him in silence. She said nothing, because she had already said everything before. The grandson, in a soft voice, asked, "And what's the point of saving, Grandpa?" The old man couldn't answer. He got up, shuffling his feet, and went out to the porch. There he sat under the dark night. The cold wind blew through the trees, and he hugged his arms like a lost child. He thought that maybe his whole life had been a mistake. Lazy before, a slave afterward, and now mocked by money. For the first time, he felt there was no way out. The following days were bitter. In the field, he had no strength left. He could barely fill his cotton sack, and the boss looked at him with contempt. At home, food became scarcer. The grandmother knitted at night, and the grandson looked at him with hunger in his eyes. The grandfather felt a crushing weight on his chest, and at times he thought of giving up everything, letting himself fall and never getting up. But one morning, Sitting on the porch with his gaze lost, he saw a neighbor pass by. He was carrying a basket full of clean white eggs, neatly arranged. He walked smiling towards the village with a firm step like a secure man. Later, another passed carrying bottles of fresh milk. The glass clinked as he walked. He didn't seem worried either. Neither carried checks nor hidden jars. They carried things that were useful, things they produced every day. The grandfather looked at them at length, pressing his lips together with a mixture of envy and sadness. And then, like an echo from afar, he remembered his grandson's voice. What if instead of saving money, we buy chickens? At first, the idea had seemed like childish nonsense, but now, in the midst of his heart's darkness, it sounded like a single, lit spark. He didn't think much more. He opened the jar and collected the little that remained. He gathered the coins, the crumpled bills, everything that was still usable. He went to the market with his head down, asked in an unsure voice, and after bargaining badly, as always, he returned with a few skinny, ugly, nervous hens. Arriving home, he released them in the yard. The grandson clapped his hands, excited, running after them. Now we have an egg factory, Grandpa. The grandfather saw him smile, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a light in his heart. In the first few days, they barely gathered 1 or 2 eggs. The grandmother cooked them carefully, dividing them into 3 parts, as if they were treasure. When there was an extra one, they sold it to a neighbor who gave them a few coins. With that money, they bought another plumper hen. The grandfather began carrying an old notebook. His writing was crooked. He got the calculations wrong, but he wrote down every egg, every sale. He felt that he was finally doing something of his own. Little by little, the yard filled with cackling. The grandson ran after the chickens. The grandmother collected the eggs in a basket, and the neighbors began to visit. Old man, sell me a dozen. Will you have more tomorrow? The grandfather, who before only knew checks and jars, now counted eggs, did calculations, negotiated clumsily, but with pride. The work was no longer a chain, it was his own fruit. One afternoon, holding an egg in his hand, he looked at it as one looks at a miracle. He called his grandson and spoke to him in a firm voice. This is worth more than a jar full of bills, because this feeds, this multiplies, and this never loses its value. Saved money dies, but if you make it produce, you will always have something on the table. The boy hugged him, smiling. Then you're not lazy anymore, Grandpa? The old man squeezed him against his chest, with tears in his eyes. No, son. I've learned that laziness and dead savings lead to the same place. Nothing. From then on, the jar remained forgotten under the bed, empty like old illusions. When someone in the village mentioned saving, the grandfather would respond with calm wisdom, pointing to the chicken-filled yard. Saving money is like holding water in your hands. It always escapes. Make it work, even if you start with 1 hen, because only then does life truly flourish. And that's how, in those Texas fields, the man everyone called lazy became the one who discovered the greater truth. Never save money.